Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Good to see you, Greg.
Hey, how are you? It's on mute.
I'm doing well. I'm just walking through the neighborhood of Riverdale. It's Riverdale Community Hall, where many fine hippie events have happened over the years. Let me just make sure you are co-host. There you go. So you can share anything you want to share. And yes, so welcome everybody. We'll kind of dive right in. So excited to be here with my colleague Greg Faxon, who done a few things together now over the years. Certainly has more to say about sales than I'll ever have to say, and has some thoughts on pricing and how to price our packages, which is just, of course, one of these places people get so stuck. We get so far. We think of a niche, we come up with a package we're excited by, and then we just fail. So, God, what do I charge? And then this is just obviously a very difficult question with no easy answers. There are no pricing gods to pray to who can just give you a clear, easy answer. But we've got a good friend, Greg, here, who's going to be helping us out. So, Greg, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'll have my camera off, but I'll just turn it over to you and let you run the show.
All right. Love it. Thanks, Tad. So I was inspired to reach out to Tad about this because I saw an article by Rebecca Tracy on your site, Tad, that did a really good job talking about moving from one-offs into packages. And I really like Becca's work. And one of the things that I felt like wasn't included, it was just outside the scope of the article, was pricing those packages. And it's one thing to price sessions or to price hours. I think that's a little bit easier for people to get their heads around. It's another thing to put a price to a longer term package, especially when that starts to add up, figuring out, okay, what is this worth? What number do I put on this? And sometimes that's influenced by how you sell it as well. So that's a lot of what we can dig into. I'm going to make sure that I have my chat up as well for you all, because I'm happy to answer questions or clarify whatever would be useful. There's a few different things that I wanted to mention that I found helpful with pricing that I know clients have found helpful, but I'd love to hear in the chat what currently is your biggest sticking point around pricing? What questions do you have? What do you find challenging when it comes to pricing your packages? I'd love to see that in the chat. That way I can just make sure it's as relevant as possible for everyone. I'd also love to see, if you don't have a specific question, go ahead and put in the chat whether you're currently charging for longer term packages or not, whether you're doing one-offs, longer term packages, or you somehow have a different type of offering. Okay, free items and $6,000 service and nothing in between. Nice, Lauren, one-off packages. Feel good about my packages, but around the time I raised the top end of my scale, sales slowed down. Okay, that could be a good topic to dive into. What to do when you think you're doing what you're supposed to and you're charging more, and that impacts sales. All right, Sunday said, I'm concerned my audience won't be able to pay what I need to charge. Not sure if that's entirely true, but no, it's partly true. So somehow there's stories sometimes that we create as we're going through what could be just a logical or business rational exercise of pricing a service. And we're thinking ahead, will people pay this? Is this beyond what my audience can do? Does this make sense to charge this? All right, I charge sliding scale by the month. Cool. Alan Watts. Cool. Alan Watts is back into this chat. I love it. Knowing the price of first packages, having never done them before. Okay, good. So we have a range of things here. And I also see Lauren says, I want to make sure I'm charging the right price point for my ideal audience, which is newer coaches who don't have a ton of money to spend. Also working on pricing products. All right. So let's start with this, because I think this will frame the discussion. My my first suggestion when it comes to pricing, if that's a sticking point or it's feeling unclear, is to go back to the foundations that Tad always suggests and figure out what is my real focus, what's my niche in terms of who I want to support and the main problem I solve for them or what I do for them. And my recommendation would be that you choose one niche and one type of offer. That alone should get you to the point where you wouldn't even necessarily be on this call, right? One niche and one pricing point, and you're off to the races. The reason why that's important is because when we expand the pricing conversation to how do I price this one signature package that I'm putting together into how do I think about my pricing for my low end offer, my ebook, then my package, then my retreat. Now we're introducing a lot of operational complexity, and that's a harder question to solve. And so even within this call, I'd encourage you, if you haven't been that focused, to just have one offer that you're honed in on right now, just treat this conversation in the context of one offer that you really want to double down on this year, and one offer that ideally you're planning or is your main revenue generator. That way it's as specific as possible. The reason why I recommend starting off with the niche is because in a way, niching in and of itself creates value, and price should be, if you're doing it correctly, a reflection of value. Okay, so what do I mean when I say niching creates value? So if I'm helping, let's say I'm helping business owners get more clients, right? That's one type of offer, right? And there's a certain amount of value there. There's some foundational things I could teach around marketing. Then let's say I help architecture, like solo architecture folks get more clients for their architecture business. Just in that one move of refining my target market, there's some value created. And the reason there's value created is now everything I'm delivering as part of that package becomes a little bit more specific. So if I run an architecture business, I don't have to think, okay, there's this foundational principle he taught about, whatever it is in terms of getting clients, going to live events, right? But now he's talking about it for architecture businesses, and he's actually named the 10 live events I need to go to every year to get clients, right? So just in that niching process, you can create some more value, and that allows the price point to be higher, because I'm basically saying, instead of you translating these general marketing principles, you're going to be doing it just with my plug and play stuff for architecture businesses. Okay, so throw in the chat if that makes sense, if you kind of see how clarity on the niche is an important factor in pricing. And if that feels clear, we can kind of move away from that, because I don't want to expand the topic to niching, but I do want to make sure that that makes sense. Yeah. Okay, cool. So the more specific you are, the more leeway you have on your price point in general. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and Greg, another example I'd give that a friend gave to me on this is, let's say you're teaching sales. Well, okay, so you got the general sales principles, but then you say, no, I want to teach door-to-door sales. And then somebody says, no, I want to teach door-to-door sales for people to sell vacuums door-to-door. With every single step, that workshop is going to be so much more relevant, useful, practical, actionable, as you say, full of resources specific to your industry. So yeah, to me, this is so huge when we're looking at the value of an offer. If there's a direct relationship between relevance and value, 100%.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, and feel free, Tad. That's great to just jump in with anything additional here. So I have a few things that I want to address again that I found helpful, and then I'll dive into some of these specific questions and challenges folks are having. The second one is a question of, does charging higher prices mean that your clients get better results? Okay, right. So this is very in vogue in the last, I wouldn't say right now, but for the last 5 or 10 years, especially in high ticket mastermind type programs, the idea of just charge more and then the clients will get better results because they'll be more committed. And oftentimes that's motivated by the fact that the program that you're a part of is quite high end, right? So in order for you to get a return on investment, it helps if your price point's higher, if that makes sense. So that's helpful for the people who are running the mastermind to make sure their folks are charging more, because revenue will come in more quickly. I think there's actually something to this, but not in the way that it's framed. So what I've noticed is that oftentimes if you sell higher end packages, so more comprehensive, more hands-on, something that's a higher price point, it will sometimes filter out clients who weren't as motivated to get that result. right? So if I sort of want to have an architecture business, just to keep using the example, I kind of dip my toe in, maybe that would be interesting. Maybe I'm paying $100 to figure out if I even care about this thing, if this is interesting to me, $500, right? If someone's charging 10, 20K, I really got to be like, no, I'm ready to do this. I'm ready to commit to this. And that client, because they've been filtered for, may end up being a client that's slightly more committed, takes action sooner, and gets a better result as a result of the program. So I don't think, I wouldn't agree that charging higher prices makes your clients more committed, but there is something there where if you want to make sure you work with clients who are going to take action on what you're proposing, you can sometimes filter out lower commitment clients with higher prices. I'm curious if anyone else has thoughts on that in the chat, because that's just something I wanted to address directly because it's so pervasive in the pricing conversation. Typically what you hear is just charge as much as you possibly can. And I think the conversation is more nuanced than that.
Yeah, I would add in, as people are throwing in their thoughts, the question here really is one of, is this a fit? Are they really committed? And it's not so different in indigenous cultures, you know, when they would do and still do initiations, let's say of the young people, they asked a lot. If you go to a ceremony, you don't just show up often and do the ceremony. There's a whole, there's a lot of prep. You have to do prayer ties. You have to prepare, you know, gifts. There's a lot of work that goes into it. And so if you know that that's going to be asked of you, that does have you rethink it. So sometimes it's effort, sometimes it's time, sometimes it's money. But that is a way that you can, yeah, if you say, hey, if you want to work with me for the year, then you're going to have to do this 2 days of homework. There's a bunch of people, oh, I don't want to do all that homework. And so they're out. So you're not asking money, but you're asking something, you know, which money is an expression of some kind of investment. And I think it is true. The more that people invest, generally, the more they get out of it. Because I hear this from body workers all the time. I gave a free massage to all these people, and they were the most difficult clients I had to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. So I like that frame of pricing as one type of filter or one piece of friction that you could put in that weeds things out. Weeds some folks out who might not have been a good fit, but that may not be the direct thing that's causing the change. It's just one type of filter. Okay, so the next piece that I want to address is, at the beginning of the call, I encouraged you to focus on one offer. What I found can be helpful here is you might say, well, am I supposed to have like a ladder where people can engage with me at different price points, right? So I sort of meet people where they're at, and that's another common piece of advice. What I found can be helpful is having one offer that you can really stand behind, starting off on the higher end, higher touch spectrum of things. And then what's nice is you can have some variety in the ways that folks pay for that. So different types of payment plans, right? And in some cases that can address different parts of the market, right? If we can break it up monthly, that might be one type of customer versus the person who's able to pay up front for a little bit of a discount. So again, my encouragement would be, as you're putting your packages together, try to focus on one package and really validate that to start, but know that you could meet people where they are with your payment plans. So you could have an upfront, you could have a 2-pay, right? Half and half, you could have a monthly. There's a lot of ways you can get creative in terms of how you break up the payments. And I'm happy to go deeper into that. But that to me is almost a lower leverage question. Like, oh, should I charge a little more upfront and the monthly payment is lower, and then that increases people's stick rate. So there's like some funky things you can do there. But I think ultimately we want that total investment to be something that makes sense relative to what they're getting, right? So value-based pricing is all about, based on what this person could get out of this, does that investment make sense to my target client? Or is it weirdly low? Like there's almost must be something wrong that they're charging this low based on what they're saying I'm going to get. Or is it so high that it just doesn't make sense, the value versus the price that they're paying? One of the things that Tad and I have spoken about when we talk about a sales conversation is at any given point in a sales conversation with a potential client, there's almost like I forget who I learned this from. There's like two sides of a scale in their head. And on one side is how much does it cost? And on the other side is how much value do I perceive can be gained from this relationship, right? And if the cost, the investment side is heavier than the value side, they won't buy. And if the perceived value is more than the investment, then they'll buy. And so a lot of a sales conversation is helping them see what would be the value for you here, right? And does that make sense relative to the investment? Okay. Any questions at this point? Okay, I have a final piece I want to share, and then we'll dive into what would be useful for you all. So one thing that I've found helpful in terms of testing pricing. So some of you may have come to the call and you have pricing now, or you maybe have some different options and you're trying to decide what you want to charge for your package. Is something I call the capacity equation. Okay, and so it's really simple. It's not complicated math. You basically take on one side of the equation, it's how many clients or customers you want at a given time. Okay, so let's say a full client roster for me is 10 clients. Okay, and then equals, and then on the top, we have what your monthly revenue goal is. And on the bottom, divided by, you have your price per month per client. Okay, so I'll give you an example. Let's say I have capacity with this type of offer. I say, okay, I could probably take on 10 clients and support them well, given what this offer looks like. Okay, let's say my monthly revenue goal, to keep it simple, is $10,000. Then how much do I have to charge per client per month? It's pretty simple, right? So it's $1,000. So just knowing that little equation, so 10 equals 10,000 divided by 1,000. Okay, so you can mess around with this a little bit, and depending on what you want to solve for. So maybe you say, all right, I know my monthly revenue goal, and I know the price per month per client. What's my actual capacity here? What does a full client roster look like? Right. So let's say my monthly revenue goal is 5,000 and the amount I'm making per month is 500. Right. How much is that? So that's bad with math. What did I say? 5,000 divided by 500. Okay. So 10 clients, right? 10 clients per month. That would be my capacity. So same thing as the last one. And I found that that's useful because sometimes people will assign a price and not think about what is actually my monthly revenue goal. How many people do I need in this offer for this to work? And so sometimes people will set a price and they'll say, oh, I want to charge $200 a month for coaching, not realizing that with their monthly revenue goal, they're going to take on, 50 clients, right? It just might not work feasibly if it's a one-on-one offer. They may not have the availability to do that. So I found that simple equation to be just a helpful test for your pricing, depending on what you want to solve for. So those are the main bullet points I wanted to share. I'd love to hear any questions, clarifications, things that you're struggling with. And while you do that, I'm going to look through what we started with and some of the early questions so that we can work through those. Okay. So Aruna, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, I have free items and a $6,000 service and nothing in between. So yeah, hey, so are you open to coming off mute?
Sure.
Hey, cool. So when you wrote this, do you see that as a problem that you have free and then a $6,000 service and nothing in between?
Yes.
Or you just mentioning
it? It just feels the opposite of what everybody else does. Usually it's like funnels and blah, blah, blah. But really, we just have this, we are very niched down. So kind of what we offer is like a big solution for people who buy our product. And yeah.
So do you mind if I ask, what's the $6,000 service? What's the niche?
Well, we help experienced yoga teachers with, we license out our yoga teacher training so that other experienced yoga teachers who are qualified can use it. So they don't have to write manuals. They don't have to plan a training. They just teach a ready to go training. And so it's like, it saves them a lot of time. It usually saves like a year or more of writing and research and everything. So, we've sold about 20 licenses. So it's working for those who have that problem. But then I just wonder if we should have, something less expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. What's making you wonder if you should have a less expensive thing? Is it more just, I think I should, or are you seeing something specific in the business or with the customers that tells you that?
More just, I think I should.
Cool. Yeah, I appreciate the extra information. I would say, I don't know, the size of your business. We don't need to share it here, but I would say until you're at, multiple six figures beyond, you could do just this offer and have a, 7-figure business. So I don't know what your goals are. And I know it's not all about money, but just as thinking about the pricing of this, you could just have this one licensing thing. It could be 6K or above. And I think that focus will actually serve you quite well. I'm a big fan of really great free stuff and then a very high-end offer. And why I like it is because it just keeps things super simple, right? You can always depend on and go back to that higher end offer, and it's profitable. There's a lot of margin there for you to create a great product and support folks. And then all the other stuff, instead of trying to say, oh, how do I create this course for $100? It's like, no, just make something free and that will work as your marketing. And people, as Tad has always said, I always share this, Tad, with folks, is like, you can make the best thing and be so clear for free and still people will want your help to implement it. And so I keep that in mind a lot. So my advice in just a very short time of coaching, I don't have all the context, is I love your focus and discipline, and I would stay the path. And I think your customers or the business will tell you when you need to expand beyond that one offer.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good work. Okay. Yeah, so I wanted to respond to the name here is Slam, but I wanted to respond to this comment right at the beginning that said, I feel good about my packages, but around the time I raised the top end of my scale, sales slowed down. So this person raised their prices, sales started to slow down. And this isn't uncommon. One of the reasons that I actually like, one of the reasons why I actually like starting a little bit higher end in the business instead of starting with a really low ticket product is because in some ways it forces you to improve your sales game. It forces you to improve whether you're selling on the phone and you need to improve your enrollment skills, or it's your copywriting skills on a sales page or something like that. If you start a little bit higher end, then you can always go lower end, if that makes sense. You can always make something less expensive and have it sell, but you can't always do the opposite. And so there's a couple different ways to look at this. One way could be, well, the market's actually telling me that I've gone beyond what the value equation is for this person. It just doesn't make sense anymore. So lower the price back down. Oftentimes before, when I'm working with clients, before we would lower the price, I'd want to go through a phase of really being disciplined about increasing my enrollment skills and saying, what's the opportunity here to see if I can improve those? Because the level of skill you might need in an enrollment call for selling a $100 one-off session. Hey, will you do one more session with me? This one's going to be paid for $100, right? There's not a lot of risk there. So there's not a lot of sales skills needed. Versus if it's a higher end product, you have to improve that. And so I might spend 30 days or so, depending on your cash situation, seeing like, hold on, before I lower the price, and you weren't suggesting you do this, but this is what I would do. Let's see if I can listen back to some recordings of my sales calls. Like every call I do where I offer this, I'm gonna listen back to it and I take notes on what I can do better. How can I learn some different frameworks? How can I get feedback? All of those things. Because you may find that it's not a pricing problem, but it's a sales problem. And so figuring out what the problem is when an offer isn't selling tells you what you need to do about it. So that's one piece of feedback that came up for me around this. Tad, do you have anything on that? Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I'm here.
It's all good.
Yeah, it's I think it is true. It's easier to start high and go low than it is to start low and go high. Because if you start really low, if you start, bargain basement pricing, what'll happen is that when you raise your price, people are like, you're not down with the movement anymore. You're not, and it's, if you drop it, everybody's happy. So there is that. There's also, to me, a question of really looking at, okay, if sales drop, but if we look at the increase of pricing, did it drop so much, or are we basically at the same level, but just with less clients, which is great. Another question is, if you're doing a promotion, sometimes I got this from Rebecca Tracy. You can say, hey, I noticed a bunch of you didn't buy, and I'm just curious as to why. Was it the pricing? Was this? Sometimes it's worthwhile just asking and finding out. And then also, yeah, I would agree. If you raise the price, well, it's always good to explain why we're raising the price, make sure there's a reason, there's a rationale for it, and to make sure it's a chance with the sales skills, but also with the copywriting skills. Like, okay, I really need to up my game on the sales, or even with the membership. When I did it, I realized I'd not made the most solid case I could, and I needed to really hone that sales letter. And I reworked it. I completely repolished it. So sometimes it's that, and then sometimes you realize, oh, I need more pink spoons. I need to do more intro events. I need more education to build that relationship with people, so that they wouldn't bulk as much. And so sometimes people are like, oh, I've raised the price, but I'm still using the same sales and marketing process that I used in the past, and you may need to change it. It's like, okay, at this price now, you need one-on-one conversations. Now you need to do intro events, etc.
Yeah, that I really like that. And what I've found is typically the higher ticket price, the higher the ticket price, the longer the sales cycle is going to be. So if it's $100, you walk in, you buy something at Walmart for $100, you check out, you're done. You just read the tag that said how much it costs, right? But for me, for what I sell, I have multiple conversations with folks. I don't even propose in the first call with them, right? It's quite a high-end engagement. And so that's a longer sales cycle. And back when I used to just fill groups that were sort of in the middle range, it was one call, right? And I've also sold things with no calls. So depending on that price point, I really like that thought on how your sales cycle could change. And I also want to highlight what Tad said, which is it's okay if conversion rates drop as long as ultimately it's more profitable. And actually it's better. I would personally, the reason I'm bullish on higher end stuff, especially when you start, is because I'd rather serve fewer customers better, right? I'd have 1 million customers paying me $1, and then I get all the customer support requests for all the 1 million customers, right? It's actually better to serve fewer folks just because it's more margin. That's more space in the business to actually do a good job supporting them.
Yeah, I would say with this, this is something that people often miss is, right, you've got so many people, and there's the customer support, there's all the tech stuff that could go wrong with every single person, there's all the people who might get lost needing help. So the more individuals you have, the more chance there is for that. That's key. So yeah, there is a business model consideration here, and yeah, I think that's my main thought.
Cool. All right. So Alan Watts had asked, knowing the price of first packages, having never done them before. So this is a tough one, right? Because when you have nothing, it's one thing to change your price, increase or decreases. It's one thing to create a price out of thin air in a way. And I think this is actually one of those things in entrepreneurship that's very hard to wrap your head around. Like, wait, I can create something, I can choose the price for it, and then I can ask people to pay for it. It's one of those things that's very not an employee mindset, because you basically have to believe that it makes sense. And if it doesn't make sense to you, it's going to be very hard to sell to others. So one of the things with pricing that should go first and foremost is, are you able to sell yourself on that this price makes sense? Not because some business coach told you to do it or some mastermind told you to charge more. Until you're sold on it, it's going to be very hard to create that copy or have that sales conversation with someone because they won't feel the conviction. I'd rather go a little bit lower to start and build your confidence. We were like, this is such a steal. Like if I was this person, I wouldn't even be asking any questions. It's like, let's go. The other benefit to starting a little bit lower than is comfortable is you're more likely to get repeat business with that and retention, right? So repeat business is often the result of, and Tad, I know you write about this, expectations being exceeded in some way, or there needs to be what's called a customer surplus. There's a huge difference between what they're paying and what they're getting. The higher that is, the higher that, like for me, Netflix is how many dollars a month? I don't know, it's like $9 or something, but I get all the movies ever. Like my wife and I love just chilling and snuggling up and watching Netflix. There's a huge surplus there, which is why people talk about Netflix movies and TV shows they're finding, and that people just stay on that for years. So specifically with the question, knowing the price of the first package, having never done them before, I'd recommend that you start with, as you're designing your package, where are they now? What's the point A? Where are they trying to get to? Where's the point B? And the whole point of the package should be, how can we efficiently move them to point B, to that like second island, as Tad would say, right? So that's the first part of the offer, is the actual outcome. The second thing I'd start to get clear on is, how are we getting them there? What are the 3 to 5 areas, buckets we're going to work on, things that we're going to do? Okay. Then once you have that, you can talk about the logistics of the offer. And this is literally a 1-page document you can bang through in 30 minutes. What are the logistics of the offer? Are there 2 coaching calls a month? Are you offering some between call support? How much time is that going to be for you? I know Stephanie mentioned trying to come up with the number that includes the behind the scenes hours. So this has to include everything in delivering the offer, not the sales and marketing. That still, in a way, it has to be accounted for in the price, but we're just focused on the offer, the logistics of it. And then my recommendation, and this is just because sometimes it's helpful for people to have a place to start, but obviously prices are going to vary widely. If you're doing a coaching consulting type offer, I like to use $500 a month for 3 months just as a starting point. It's almost crazy to throw anything out here because offers, again, vary so much. But I found sometimes people just having that, they'll immediately say, well, it's not a 3-month offer. It's obviously a year offer. So great. Now we know your timeline. Right? Or let's say $500 isn't actually a lot for this thing that I'm doing. So great. What price would feel good for you? And one of my colleagues, Michael Neal, I don't know what his name for this is, but it's sort of like your happy price. It's like getting someone to ask you or writing something down and saying, all right, it's $1,000 a month. And then you can only answer 3 things. It's too high, it's too low, or it's just right. And so you keep ratcheting up and down until you're like, okay, that's just right. So part of this is going to be strategic, and you're using that equation I mentioned on, well, does that make sense for your capacity and your income goal? But the other part is just going to be intuitive. It's going to be, are you sold on it? Does it make sense to you? Does it feel like the right price to start with, knowing that you can always increase it down the road? Okay, hope that's helpful for you. Okay, Tad, and I just want to check, are we good for the hour? Is that what this is planned for? Just want to make sure.
Yeah, just keep going.
All right. Okay, so Lauren had asked, I want to make sure I'm charging the right price point for my ideal audience, newer coaches who don't have a ton of money to spend. Also working on pricing products, templates, ebooks. All right, so I'm just going to be a bad coach and just give advice on this one, because I think that would be most helpful in the Q&A type format. So I wouldn't work on pricing other products, templates and ebooks. I would just forget about that for now. And you'll earn your way to the lower end stuff by just getting this offer that just, you love it. You can stand behind it. It's working and it's generating cash for you. And then we can kind of go down the spectrum. The other thing I noticed here is you said your audience is newer coaches who don't have a ton of money to spend. I don't know if I'd recommend that as a niche, folks who don't have a ton of money to spend. I know that like you don't have to choose your target market based on like the ultra wealthy, right? I know that isn't what this group is trying to do. I think right off the bat, if you're articulating in your niche that they don't have a ton of money to spend, there could be a problem there in you being able to build a profitable business. I've noticed for me, I work with a lot of newer coaches, right? So typically our sweet spot is coaches who have worked with paid clients. They're getting results for paid clients, but they want help scaling and getting consistent clients, 5K, 10K, 20K a month, that type of thing. So the super beginners, they benefit from my free content. And then the folks who are really scaling up beyond 20K a month get referred out to someone else. So you might think, well, coaches who've only worked with a few paid clients, there's not a lot of money to spend there. But there's actually many different groups within that target. There's people who will never invest in help to build their coaching business. There's people who are immediately going to spend 15 to 18K on a one-on-one coach to do this the right way, right? There's people who are going to buy a $997 course first and try to figure it out themselves. There's someone who's going to do the group program. So there's lots of different people within that market. And just because they're at a certain stage of business doesn't mean that actually has to be matched to a lower end offer. It's true that often a beginner market will start with a lower end offer, but actually one of the things I saw in my business is there weren't a lot of folks supporting coaches early on with a really high end offer, like really high touch. So all these coaches were like, man, I keep getting pushed to courses and there's like all these, group programs, but then I don't really get attention. And so they're getting burned by this stuff. Eventually they're like, I don't know, one-on-one is just what's going to work for me. So let me just do it right and hire Greg and his team. So sometimes there's actually an opportunity that's counterintuitive within the market because no one's really been doing it. I don't think I can advise beyond that of the right price point for the audience, but I think I would start by questioning assumptions on what your audience can afford, wants to pay for, and then what will match that. I've noticed this even in a sales context. So let's say we know the price point of our offer. Many people will create little stories in their head about someone's ability to pay before they've even made the offer. It's almost like saying, I want to ask this person out, but they probably don't like it because I'm short. So they're probably gonna say no to that. And then they're probably busy because I know they're like a CPA and it's tax season. So I should ask them out in a couple of months. It's like, let's just let them decide. You know what I mean? Let's just ask. And then as the adult, they can decide if it's worth it. So if any of you are finding yourself in too much of a loop, you're almost overdoing some of that prep work on your pricing before you validate it. Let's let the people decide, right? Let's run a good sales call, create a good sales letter, and let's start to get feedback because you might be surprised. It might be something that a lot of them would be willing to pay if you do a good job. Okay. Ooh, good stuff. Okay, so what do we have here? Stephanie, if we're new to the game, should we price packages lower to start? So we've touched on this briefly. My recommendation would be, and this is going to sound confusing when I say it the first time, if you're new to the game, I would start with a high-end offer, but price it a little bit lower than you ultimately want it to be. Okay, so we talked about how high-end offers are nice at the beginning because they don't require a massive audience, right? I don't need 1 million people to then go through the sales funnel and then 100 of them buy the $1,000 thing, right? I just need like 5 people, like 5 people paying me $5K and I'm good. And so I'd recommend you start higher end, higher touch. It also allow you to figure out what works. Like one-on-one can be a trap in a way, because if you get stuck in it too long, it doesn't force you to articulate your signature process, right? Because you're just showing up and supporting the person with what they want. So you have to watch out for that. But it's also nice because when you're starting out in a niche or in a business, you don't necessarily know where people are getting stuck, right? If you're your own avatar, you might have a sense. But once you've worked with 5, 10 people one-on-one, you're like, all right, everyone gets stuck here. Oh, everyone finds this part useful. And then when you do the group program or the course, you're actually doing it based on real world experience with clients. So that's one reason I recommend high end. But the other reason is because it just takes fewer clients, which means it takes a smaller audience and it's requiring fewer consults of you to do. And the reason why I recommend pricing slightly below is for the reasons we mentioned before, to increase your confidence, right? And when I say slightly below, I mean like 90% of what it might become.
Yeah, and if I can just throw in that sometimes people, sorry, it's a little loud here. Yeah, sometimes people think that selling a higher end thing is so much more work than selling a lower end thing, and it's not always true. Sometimes it's as much work to sell a $5,000 thing as a $1,000 thing. It's not always. Sometimes there's a much bigger sales cycle, but sometimes there's not. And so people will stop themselves saying, "Oh, it just takes so much more to sell this really big thing," and that's not necessarily true. That's also an assumption worth questioning. Sometimes it's just as easy. That can be true too.
Yeah, I've been really surprised over the years as my price point has increased and conversion rate hasn't really changed. Now, obviously, I'm getting better at sales during that time. On my case studies, I'm getting more case studies, all of that. But another thing that can surprise folks sometimes, and some of you on the call may have experienced this, you might have been talking to a potential client. You recommend, you offer your first price. And then you're like, for whatever reason, when you're early on, you're like, I really want to make it work with this person. So they're like, I can't do that. So you like cut the price in half and they still say no. And it's like, hold on, something's happening here where I don't understand it. Obviously, this isn't purely about price. This is somehow how they're viewing the value. And sometimes what I even recommend to new clients, if they're getting a lot of no's at first, is ask, what would you be willing to pay? Just out of curiosity. Like, I'm not saying I'm going to meet you there, but like, what are you willing to invest in this? Sometimes folks will have that experience and they'll say, the person said like $400, and it's a $5,000 offer. I'm like, well, there's a mismatch here, right? So you can learn things from that as well. Okay. So a couple of folks I see wanted to maybe go in one-on-one. So I saw Slam, you had a question. I'm happy to do a little on the spot coaching and support here if you want to come off mute.
Cool. Well, I was just wanting to like flush out a little bit because I think the pieces that you all both shared are true. Like the numbers are pretty similar, even with my rates raised. And really, what I did was it was like $200 to $400 a month sliding scale, and I just made it $250 to $700 because somebody within one of the networks was like, "Hey, I just did that, and somebody signed up for $700." But I don't. None of my clients have signed up for $700. But like, yeah, and like some of them that were at when it was 200 to 400, maybe it was like 200 to 350. Some of them went up to 400, but like that's the top of my range. And then I have the scholarship program that can actually basically go as low as $80 if people fall inside of this demographic. So like if I can say like, what would you pay? And then generally meet people there. But it's like kind of too much of a range. I'm toying with this idea of being like, well, what if it's 325 or even 326? I think that's how much my girlfriend pays for her gym membership, and she gets a ton out of it, and it's just the right amount of stretch, but she goes every week and like is getting buff. And so I'm like, maybe that's but
what's the real challenge here for you?
Well, I think the real challenge is I need to up my sales page because I mean, I've been in this for 2 years, and the first year was like really easy. It was just my network. And now I'm expanding beyond my network, and I want that price to, like show people that it's of value, right? If it's like $200, people are like, cheapest coach, no way, I'm not going to do that. And if it's like $1,500 a month, I support queer small business owners. They're going to be like, yeah, right. Like, except though I'm compelled by this idea of like doing it right. I think that's a nice phrasing of it. So I'm kind of just toying it around, and it's a little, I'm just debating whether I should like make a suggestion, like here's the range, but here's what I suggest you pay, or something, or like here's the number, and instead of it being like 3 different tiers, just being like, it's $325. If you can't afford it, it's $250. If you can't afford that, it's or something. Yeah. But I don't want to make it more complicated, but I want to make it like a little bit easier. Oh, I want to like, encourage people to stretch a little bit more.
Okay. So this is interesting. I want to give a caveat. First of all, thank you for sharing. I want to give a caveat that sliding scale is not something I use in my business, and I don't have a lot of experience with it. So I don't want to weigh in directly on that because I'm not the expert there. But I will say this, if I was in the client's shoes, I think I would want some guidance in a sliding scale type situation. I think that's one of the things that you're speaking to. And whenever we give a range, whenever we give a number in general, we're creating an anchor in someone's mind, right? So if you're thinking like, if your anchor for a car is you just went to the Bugatti dealership and it's like $1 million, then when you go to the Hyundai dealership, it's like, oh, this is cheap, right? So we're all familiar with this concept. So one of the things that you might experiment with is what's the range that you share? And I think the top end of the range will actually influence where people settle on the range, right? Obviously, one of the reasons you're doing sliding scale is you want to be equitable and you want to accommodate people where they are. So we want to be careful not to like how much we're manipulating this psychological tactic here, but you are anchoring them one way or the other with the range that you choose. And I think giving a suggestion could be helpful as well, but making that top end, or even using the language like most of our clients invest at this rate and normalizing a certain piece of the range could also be helpful for folks.
Yeah,
right. Another language on this, Lam, could be, this is the typical market value at this. When I do my day-long pay what you can workshops, it's like, hey, if you'd like to pay the full amount, it's $200. You could do a 3-pay of 67, or you can do a $25 deposit, pay what you can at the end.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, that's cool. And being like, this is what most people pay. Is it? Yes, and I'm like, so I'm classic. Like my niche is this, but then I miss out on all this corporate work, and that's like thousands of dollars. But that has to be a different.
I recommend, and then we can kind of wrap, so I can continue to run through. Is I think the most people pay phrase. I actually should add a clarification here for folks listening. So whenever you normalize something, that's what you're encouraging. So some of you may have read the studies on like an environmental org will say like only 30% of people like actually compost. And obviously now everyone's like, oh, okay, most people don't compost, so I won't do it either, right? So we only want to say most, we only want to normalize a behavior that we want to encourage. So if you're going to use most people pay, then hopefully most people pay, if we're going to be honest, most people need to be paying at the range you want this person to pay at.
But then it outs like what economic demographic I work with in some ways.
Yeah, I think that's a bigger discussion. That's a good point.
Yeah, that was fun.
You're welcome. Okay. So yeah, Alan, I like how you mentioned here in your comment, basically what a reference point for your price. So Alan said in the comments, my package price I have in mind is way cheaper than marrying a person who's not a fit and having to pay for divorce, 1,200 for 15 sessions and various bonuses, right? So I think for all of you, when you're thinking about your pricing, we want to also think about what's the cost of not investing in something like this. And sometimes it won't be financial, right? So oftentimes I'll hear from folks in other niches. They're like, well, you're a business coach, so there's a financial ROI. So, but I'm not a business coach, so it's somehow an inner thing. You can still get a sense of the cost. It doesn't have to be a financial cost. If you can tie it to that, it can be clear for folks. But I like what Alan's done here about having a reference point of if you continue with the status quo or you do it on your own or whatever the alternative is, here's what you're looking at. And then deciding, all right, is my thing still a deal? Because this person has options. So is this a better deal than the alternatives based on the pricing I've settled on? Okay. Andrew, thinking about increasing my price, what's an ideal increment to begin with? 10%, 25%? So I will give you some specific examples with what I know best, which is actually through a consultation, higher ticket sales through a consultation as some reference points. Beyond that, I can't speak to it. Like if you were to increase, actually I can speak to it a little bit. So let me just give the advice. Okay. So when I'm thinking about increasing the price or I'm helping a client do this, one of the things that I'm looking at is their conversion rate. Okay. So we talked about how sometimes you can raise your price and the conversion rate can go down, but not enough to have it still not make sense, right? Because your price increased too. So even your conversion rate goes down, sometimes you end up making more money. Okay. So a good rule of thumb I have is that if 25 to 50% of your conversations with potential clients are converting into paid clients, you're probably in a pretty good place with your pricing. Okay. For some people that may be surprising. They're like, well, I'm converting 90%. It's all referrals. It's all warm leads. And if that's the case, that's awesome. You may actually want to increase your price. So if you're converting above 50% consistently, that could be a sign that at least from a math business perspective, it might make sense to increase your price because you have a lot of room in that conversion rate to increase your price and still convert 1 out of 2 clients, for example. Okay. If you're converting under 25%, so less than 1 out of 4 of the people that you speak to convert into clients, it may be a sign that either A, your pricing's too high, or B, your pricing's fine, but there's another problem with your sales process, for example, right? So either your pricing's too high or you're not yet selling the way that you might be able to at that price. And the only way to figure that out is to try to improve your sales skills. So I like staying in that 25 to 50% range. When we fall outside of that, that's when I think about raising or lowering the price. And so you could use that as a benchmark to know, Andrew, whether that it makes sense for you to increase. It doesn't answer the question of what percentage that you should increase by. For me, I'll just be honest, that's a purely intuitive decision. I don't think about the percentage that I'm raising by. It's just here's the next logical jump up in price where I can actually feel it would make a difference to the potential client. So Ramit Sethi, who some of you may follow, he's sort of a personal finance guy. I feel like he's actually a little counter in his personality to some of the folks in this group, but I find his stuff really useful personally. He recommends that he basically says there's pricing bands and you can move the price around in those bands and it won't really affect conversion rate. And I think we've all seen that happen to a certain extent. Like if you're charging $400 and then you go to $420, like probably your conversion rate isn't going to change. It's just not going to change that much because to the person, it's just is the same basic amount. Okay. And so when we look at online courses, oftentimes you see people at 97, 197, 497, 997, and 1997. You don't see a lot I mean, with like George Cow and Tad, we kind of get funkier because they're more ethical with their pricing. But those are the main bands that we see. And there's reasons why there's those jumps. So one of the things Ramit will say is, well, it doesn't really make sense to price something $14.99. You may as well just be either at $9.97 and get that conversion rate, or bump up to $2K to $19.97. Okay, so I would encourage you, this is a kind of a larger conversation of what those bands are, but you can actually figure it out in your head. Like, all right, let's say I'm charging $15K. What's the next logical jump, right? Is it $18K? Is that when I'm like, ooh, that's a big difference? Or is it $16K? And so I wouldn't go by percentages. I would go by your gut sense. And again, as Tad said, you should have a reason for increasing, right? So is it like, all right, based on these case studies I've been getting recently, I really feel like this is the new price. Okay. Yes, he is not a hippie. Definitely not a hippie. All right. Michael had said, I think I got the following structure for sliding scale from Mark Silver's Pay from the Heart. Okay, and kind of gave notes. I appreciate you throwing that in the comments. Awesome. All right, so we got a little bit of time left. Are there any final questions that people have, or anyone in particular who wants some coaching on their situation?
Hi, it's Michael.
Hey, how's it
maybe
going?
I'm just following. Yeah, it's pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing well.
Maybe following up with Mark Silver's, because as you were going through, and I was realizing it's changing the frame. It's like, it's almost like there's an element of guilt in it. Like in the sliding scale, $60, I'm subsidizing you, $80 per hour. Again, these are just examples. I'm breaking even in 120. That's my living wage. And so he would start with, my going rate is 120. If that's hard, so the focus then is on the person, and I think this ties into Mark Silver's philosophy of like paying from the heart, like really trusting in people, of paying what they can afford in balance with what you think you're worth. But it seems like it's a flip, where the focus is on the person providing the service and their quality of life versus the person who's receiving the service.
I like that. I really like this observation of what's the impact on the buyer, the potential client, when presented with a sliding scale situation. And I don't really know, because I haven't done it in my business. My philosophy and the way I feel like keeps things really, really simple. And I'm sure that this isn't right for a variety of reasons that I haven't considered, but I'd rather just go high end, the price is the price, and then I can just scholarship folks for free, right? To me, that's just like, I know it's not nuanced enough, but it's just so much simpler, because all of the profit from the people just paying the one price that we're focused on, streamlined, subsidizes people to just do it free, which is also a very simple thing. So I don't know what you make of that, Michael, and if that ties in here at all.
Thank you. Yeah, it's another option. I'll let it simmer.
Cool. Any other specific questions or thoughts on this one, or are you good?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, cool. Good to see you, brother. All right. Tad, anything that we want to close with for today, do you think?
Yeah. There's a couple thoughts. One I got from Danny, and he had some interesting thoughts on pricing. And he said, if you want to figure out a price for a new package or offer or course, find the highest price one you can find in the whole marketplace. Like, what's the Cadillac? What's the most premium, one you can find, and consider that to be the ceiling. Because if you find one, especially if it's successful, it's been around for a while, okay, people are willing to pay that for something similar to what you do. And then to look at it and say, okay, what's the minimum price that you'd be still excited to be paid? So maybe you think, okay, this is a 6-month coaching program. I'm doing one call a week. If I was paid $1,000, I'd be excited. I'd still be excited to show up, $1,000 per person. Consider that the floor. So let's say the most expensive program was $30,000. That's the ceiling. So then you at least have a range. You've got somewhere to sort of figure out, in between where you're going to go. And yeah, this question of how do you make it accessible for them and sustainable for us is just one of the age-old questions in business. And there's multiple options. You know, I think what Greg has laid out is a very fine option. You charge a lot, and then you offer scholarships. You know, you can also do the pay what you can or sliding scale. That's another option. There's all sorts of ways to do. You can start a social enterprise, you know, and fundraise money to give services to people and then charge for the rest. So multiple ways to do it. There's no easy way to do it. And I like that about the bands. That does make sense. Yeah, I have the same thing in terms of increasing the prices. You know, my puttering sessions were $100. I thought, they sell out so fast. I'll make it 125. I thought, now I'll make it 150 6 months later. I'll probably take it up to 200 or 300 eventually. But then the deal was my members get it, the pro members get it for $100. You know, so it's 150 for everyone else, but they get first dibs and they get it for 100. So that's also, and then the other thing with pricing too is that the more you can, so Jesse and Charlotte Jacobs, I don't know if you know them, Greg, have you connected with them? Thrive Academy out of Santa Cruz. They do great work, and they started off as holistic practitioners, and then eventually they became business coaches for holistic practitioners. And they had a weekend workshop they did, which is how they made all their money, teaching holistic practitioners how to teach workshops, because they realized that most of them never did and never even crossed their mind. And so then, but then they developed this coaching program, that coaching program. And after a few years, they started giving away that weekend workshop for free. So, you know, there's a significant pitch in it, but it's a free, really high value weekend workshop. So that's just good to know that sometimes what will affect the price of our packages will be the other things in our business model. And as those things change, you may choose to raise or lower some of your other prices of your various things, because it may make more sense for them. It's like, well, we could keep charging for this weekend workshop, but if we gave it away for free, we get more people there, which would mean our other coaching programs would fill. And so it becomes what's called a loss leader. You know, it becomes you don't make any money on the front end, but you make all your money on the back end. And what I love about what Greg's saying is starting with a premium program. I've been saying this to a lot of people, just especially in your business model design, if you're going to have more of a funnel and kind of ecosystem, start with the premium thing. Start with that, because it's so much easier to think, what's the whole enchilada? And then start taking toppings off, you know, for lower levels of things. If you're going to do a bronze, silver, gold, start with the gold. At least think that through. Because the other reason for that is I find that when people start to think about what's the whole kitchen sink version of it, they're really inspired. They get really excited. And that excitement has them develop a package or some program that's really amazing. And then, then it's easier to say. And generally, of course, bronze is DIY, silver would be kind of a group thing, and gold is much more the one-on-one hand-holding. So then what's that premium version? And there's also, Greg, I don't know if you checked out the book Leadsology by Tom Poland.
No.
He's got this thing called the value slider. I've got a version of it in my membership. But it's a 7, he has 7, I added a couple more. Sliders, I guess, things, 7 criteria of what would your clients for a service-based offer consider value. Because it's one thing to just say, well, because I agree with what Greg's saying. So we want to charge based on value. And with the key distinction, I heard a couple of people say, this has nothing to do with what you're worth. That's off the table as a conversation here. It's just, what is this? What's the perceived value of this for your clients? That's really it. But it's not, we tend to look at it as like, okay, yeah, what is this worth for my clients? What's the value of this for my clients? And that can sometimes be difficult to ascertain, you know, one lump sum, you know, how valuable would this be? But when you go through this slider, you'll see there's actually 7 different things. So one is just like, how measurable is the result? The other one, how dramatic is that result? Another one is, how quick can they get it? How easy is it? How simple is it to implement? These are all different facets of what is valuable. So if you look at your offer and you get some feedback from other people, and you realize that the that you rank low on a bunch of things. And this offer is, when you add it all up, is only like a 3 out of 10. You know, you're not going to want to charge as much. You're going to want to work on improving the value itself, and then the pricing can reflect it. Because yeah, if you charge an amount that is more than feels right, if you charge an amount that you know, as Greg was saying, you're not convinced yourself that it's worth that amount, even if you get people to buy, you'll probably get refunds and you'll feel guilty and stressed out the whole time anyway. So Greg, thank you so much for taking the time. I know your days are so full. You have a lot on your plate, and Greg's got some great articles too on his website. His website is gregfaxon.com. Highly recommend it. Yeah, if you want some training and sales, if you're thinking, you know what, I do want to up my game. I do want to have a higher priced premium package, and I think that's going to take more skill and more thought in the structure of how I market it. I highly recommend Greg's work. He just does beautiful stuff. So Greg, is there anything else you'd like to say in closing, or anything you got coming up you want people to know about?
Yeah, I'll share 3 things that I know people have to hop off. Number 1, don't fall prey to death by a million offers. Okay. Like death by a million tiny cuts. You'll know you're ready for the next offer because you'll be booked out one-on-one with your high-end package. So if you're not there yet, just focus on that. Second is, part of this is just supply and demand. Okay. This is just basic economics, supply and demand, right? If you want to control for there's a lot of demand, not a lot of supply, that's probably time to raise your price, and vice versa. And the third little fact here, tip, is you might consider calculating your hourly rate as a business owner. Okay. Actually, the amount of hours you're working each month divided by what you've been making, and also maybe divide by your aspirational hourly rate. That'll give you some guidance as you break down these packages to know if you're even in the right ballpark of what you need to be charging for these things. So that's all for me. Thank you all for your questions and coaching. Had a lot of fun.
Thanks. Take care, Greg.
Take care. Bye, everyone.